gather into this time, just invite you to arrive in this moment with a couple deep breaths, just really releasing the day thus far, just so that we can be here now, really drop in to the present moment. This is Gene Key Contemplations. My name is Sheena with Rise Wellness, and this is the Sacred Wild. And every week we discuss the gene key of the week with a contemplation around how it might show up for us, a little bit of the texture of the gene through personal experience from the Gene Keys book, also using the Gene Key Oracle book, which is a fabulous companion. Can't say enough good things about this. And this is from Dr. Rosie Aronson. It's called The Wisdom Keeper's Inner Guidebook, The 64 Phases of Awakening. And they're wisdom stories. And each wisdom story takes us on a really short passage from the shadow to the gift and gives us some questions to contemplate. And I find it's a great jump off, or it's a great way to really get into embodying empathy for the human condition while resonating or bringing up your own experience of how this may have shown up in your own life. And so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So, let's just come together with a collective few breaths. Again, just really landing in this moment now. Remembering that what I share is not the universal truth. It's simply my truth. It's my personal experience of my truth. And you might have a different experience. And permission within this call, within all of the calls, to take what resonates and leave the rest. Permission to upgrade this information. Permission to create your own analysis of this information. Permission to create your own exploration of how these things feel in your body. So Gene Key 10, this is the shadow of self-obsession. This is the gift of naturalness, and this is the Siddhi, or as the Gene Key calls the Siddhi, or which is the divine expression of being. And so this gene is a very mystical gene and contains, like all of them, a whole lot of paradox to it. Because as we come to find out on the awakening journey, it all starts with a question, and that question is, who am I? And at some point, we go through life being really indoctrined through formal education, through biblical studies or religious cultural education, through the dynamics of the programming we receive in our childhood and through our environment, through the social conditioning of our society and the collective at large. We're constantly being fed, bombarded really, information about who we should be. And so by the time we graduate from high school, we've been completely consumed with intellect and facts and figures and numbers and dates. Well, while we've been so busy studying, we really haven't been given a whole lot of opportunity for creativity, for expression, for exploring, because we've been bombarded with all this indoctrined information. And then at 18 years old, we graduate from high school, we're sent off. Some of us join the army, some of us go to college, some of us join the workforce. And for many of us, we've now been told that we are adults and that now we're supposed to claim this new adult identity, but we don't really know who we are. We just are loaded with a whole bunch of information and not a lot of reflection on who we might become. Sometimes we are inspired to follow the footsteps of our parents and maybe seek the external validation through our family, that if we do that, that there will be an acceptance from our parents. Then sometimes we follow the support of our community, and we find that our peer groups are really influencing us. And then we follow that. I think one of the most alarming things that I've heard, and I also want to hold the paradox that maybe it can be and it can be, the most exciting thing is in the contrast, holding both places in the entire spectrum, is that when you ask a teenager now what they want to be when they grow up, their answer is they want to be an influencer. And really, what so much of that influencer dynamic is I want to be externally validated. I want to be popular. I want to have a lot of likes and comments and views and shares. And I want to like make a lot of money. And when we have a generation of people that have completely outsourced their power to be validated by everything outside of them, we create a really hollow community. We create a really hollowed out human if it's not being sourced by its own internal moral compass, but it's being validated by the patriarchy around it. So this gift of naturalness comes when we make that radical decision to contemplate life and reflect and add a new perspective on how we're engaging with life. And for some of us, this comes through trauma, and it happens through loss when we have a separation of a way that life was and then a way that life becomes. And so when I think about this gene key and people that have this within their hologenetic profile are usually considered to be old souls, or people that experience a lot of suffering earlier in their childhood. And this might have come through a deep loss or a deep experience of having to grow up really fast. And when I think about my own personal experience, and as this relates to Christmas time, I know myself, I have a hard time accessing memories of a childhood where I believed in Santa, or where I was under this notion that there was some magical being that came around to everybody's houses and just created this enchantment and this magic. That was not my experience. In my experience, I was the one that wrapped the presents, that had the presents hiding under my bed or in my closets to keep them away from my brothers, who were still believing or who were still under the illusion that there was some magical being that was coming. And I didn't want to ruin that for them. And so from a very young age, I knew there was no Santa. I knew that there was a fun, playful way of engaging with that spirit because it made things more playful, especially for a kid that's been awakened to hardship. And so the spirit of Christmas is this wonderful paradox that feels into this frequency of, isn't it beautiful that we can share the spirit of Christmas with children by creating the fantasy of Santa, because it gives them something to hope for, because it gives them something to believe in, because while they might be at home neglected, abused, not being fed, not being nourished on a soul level, not having bedtime stories read to them, not having anybody to play with, whatever the dynamic is that they created for their childhood, isn't it beautiful that there can be this fairy tale, that there's some being that's going to come in and it's going to bring this magic and this hope and this wish, when that's sometimes what these old souls really need. So there's like a paradox when there's like, how beautiful that we create these stories to give this hope. And then how sad, how heartbreaking when the child has that moment of walking in when your parents are putting the presents under the tree, and walking in when Santa's taking off the fake mustache and beard and you realize he's a fraud, like that awakening is when you go on that spiritual journey and you're like, who am I? Who am I? Who is God? And I love the quote that says, when I went searching for God, I found myself. When I went searching for myself, I found God. In that same paradoxical way, we can have this notion that, oh my God, I found that God lies within me, and how bountiful and how beautiful. While there's also that paradox of, holy shit, there is no one else coming to save us, to rescue us. There is no magical being that's going to drop the spirit of the season down the chimney and the essence of toys and money and prosperity. Like, nobody's coming to save me. There is nobody. There is no God, could be one way of looking at this. So we hold the paradox that how beautiful we all awaken at different times. And so we're all entertaining various perspectives. And through entertaining all of those perspectives, we get to create this huge mythical journey that has space for all of it, that has space for Santa, and that has space that there's no Santa, and has space for the goddess, and has space that there's no goddess, and has space that you are the goddess, and the goddess is all of us, while also entertaining that we are just this little piece of bacteria floating through space, detached from the cosmos, returning back in the contraction of going back into the stardust, which we once came from. And that's not very glamorous to think about. That's not very beautiful and majestic to think about us as going through a period of contraction. It's so much easier to think of us expanding, and so a hyper individuation is an important aspect of the human journey, which is to say that your narcissism is an important aspect of your becoming, because at some point it's essential for you to become so identified with your sense of self that you can transcend that narcissism to go beyond that. So it's essential for you to reach that place in your identity where you can observe that shift in consciousness, where you can become more than just the self. And this is a really heightened subject right now, because on our planet, we're being witness to a hyper individuation of self, along with a hyper individuation of returning back to oneness. And they're both playing out simultaneously on the planet. And we can look back at the time of the bodhisattvas. If we look back in Indian culture, there's an interesting dynamic where we have let me get this out of the book, actually. I want to say this the right way. Okay. Have I found it? Okay. The 10th city is destined to be deeply understood by all those who do not live in its embrace. Along with its programming partner, the 15th city of fluorescence, it inspires one of the great metaphysical paradoxes of all time. The paradox is well expressed through a phenomenon particular to Buddhism. that of arhats and bodhisattvas, the two externalized manifestations of the highest state of enlightenment and self-realization. Without getting weighed down in hefty Buddhism dogma, these two expressions of human perfection can be understood as representing being and becoming, respectively. The arhat is of the 10th siddhi, representing pure being, a state in which evolution no longer exists or matter. For the arhat, once he or she is enlightened, the whole universe is also enlightened. So there is nothing more to be done. For the bodhisattva, who is of the 15th siddhi, a gift of magnetism, divine expression of fluorescence, there is no end to life, which is a continually evolving state of flowering or becoming. Thus, the bodhisattva takes a vow to deliberately hold back their enlightenment in favor of helping evolution complete itself in the form of guiding others towards the state of liberation. So to experience life through the great siddhi, through this 10th siddhi, is to see everything that normal humans think of as important reduced to a game or an illusion. To the arhat, life is meaningless, time is an illusion, and therefore evolution itself is a game. Because this viewpoint is generally viewed by the unenlightened as selfish and threatening to their ongoing identification with evolution, the arhat has been mostly eschewed in favor of the bodhisattva. Thus flow the politics of enlightenment. To those outside these states, they appear utterly contrary to one another, but to the being manifested them, both poles are experienced together. The only differentiation between them is the language that the world uses, whereas the bodhisattva has a deeply focused mission to help others. So when we really finally break our identity with our form and any of our labels, we just experience everything as self, which is to say we experience the fluidity of love, constantly expressing and moving through us. So it's like the sense of self is never really here because I'm just constantly being moved through. So these beings that are constantly being moved by life, these are a lot of beings in the shamanic realms, which is how I identify. And I identify in the shamanic realms simply because I have a state of being which experiences a lot of energy. When I see the world or I feel the world as energy, I'm much more cognizant of the subtle nuances and shifts in frequency that I experience in dynamics with others. And I can also, I've also devoted myself to communing with my truth, my higher, greater self. And so I've devoted myself as a bodhisattva, reclaiming that, have devoted myself to the service of communing with something greater than I in order to assist in humanity's awakening and restoring everyone into the remembrance of that greater I, of moving beyond self-actualization just to actualization, to be and becoming fused together. So I find this such an interesting conversation, and every time I contemplate these, there's always something new that's going to come through. And so I'm just going to be radically authentic. Again, I'm speaking my truth. I'm not speaking universal truth. I am allowing all the elements to come alive for me now. I've got my crystals, I've got my tea, I've got my Palo Santo, I've got my incense, I've put my prayer in, use me for the highest and greatest good for all. And what I'm recognizing, what I'm seeing on our planet is, well, so much right now. But if we were going to look at the conflict zones right now, there is an expression of self that is collapsing an entire way of being. We're seeing the end of patriarchy in lifetime projected in our experiences. As we are experiencing and feeling a whole lot of oppression on our planet right now and atrocities, there are both poles coming through in a really heightened way, where there is, let's become, what I'm going to reflect what I see a lot in the collective consciousness right now is a feeling of, I want to be a voice for the voiceless. I remember I am triggered by the outside. I remember the times where I experienced oppression and suffering firsthand. And because I experienced those things, it's my job in this lifetime. I've made the soul contract to be the voice for the voiceless, to share my platform, to be the medicine, to be the embodiment of compassion, of grace, of an enlightened being that can see the humanity in the human condition when it's suffering extremely. There is a place where we can use our platform to share about spreading a message to return us back into our oneness. And this is by going into a place of service. And this service is saying there's atrocities happening on our planet. We remember how this happened before. We remember those past life experiences, or within this lifetime, those incarnations where we were exiled, where we were burned at the stake, where we were in the concentration camp, where we were suffering and we were in slavery and we were on the Underground Railroad, and all of the things that come up to remind us of the oppression that we experienced in our lifetime. It's coming up to be transmuted. It's coming up for us to add awareness. It's coming up on a collective level for us to reparent ourselves and say, I am going to be with that part of me that's hurting because I see oppression outside of me and it's triggering the part of me that was oppressed. And I'm going to give myself a lot of compassion right now to be with that version of myself that identifies with, through compassion, of what it was like to experience that. And maybe through that radical authenticity of naming that, maybe there's a divine action that comes from that, an inspired action. Maybe by observing that, you decide that you're going to go on your platform and you're going to ask for a ceasefire, or you decide you're going to call a representative and ask for a permanent ceasefire, or maybe you're going to go and share a powerful quote from Martin Luther King that reminds us about freedom and liberty for all, or maybe we're going to connect with someone intimately and we're going to have a deep conversation. We're going to share about what's coming up for us. But as we're feeling into all of that collective suffering, it's inviting us to be with that part of us that feels it on a collective level, because we're all fractals of the same one. So maybe we use our platform to bring us together in that grief, to bring spirituality for social activism. Now, maybe our curriculum is completely outside of that paradigm. Maybe what our mission is at this time is to actually inspire people to find their own why, to find their own reason to become inspired by life again. So maybe we're not at that place where we can advocate for social justice because we're still in that first stage of asking ourselves, who am I? Who am I if I'm not a mother, a teacher, a wife, a friend, a partner, a spouse, a business collaborative, however we can identify with other with. When we are newer to that or less ingrained in that path of understanding who we are, then right now, that might be the most authentic pace for us, is to become a little bit narcissistic, to form our own identity in order to say, who am I when someone's not telling me who I should be? So if we're in that place of breaking down the patriarchy within us, can we allow ourselves the compassion to be there, to allow enough time and space and patience to be in that process without the judgment? Because when we add the judgment that we should be doing this, other people are here, there's some kind of societal pressure, some kind of limit that we're putting on ourselves, we start to alienate ourselves and we start to judge ourselves. And then we start to judge other people. And then before we know it, we're really judging and we're pointing fingers. And then now we've isolated. And now we don't have a big community because maybe we've come out of one bubble and maybe we haven't really found our pod of where we're going to be now. It's so important to recognize that everybody's going to be on their own authentic pace on what works for them. And sometimes what feels like isolation for some person is self-compassion for another person. So sometimes if we have built up a really unhealthy ego, it's going to take a long time to rebuild a healthy ego of who we are. Because even especially in the spiritual community, there's a lot of spiritual coaches and leaders out there that want to tell you to kill off your ego. And if there's someone that's telling you to kill off a part of you, then that's not ceasefire within you, because you're still asking a part of you to die off and still saying that there's an archetype within you that's not safe to be exactly as it is. And until we can add love and compassion and awareness and insight into that aspect of us, we can't transmute it. So narcissism is the first step in actualization, self-actualization, because we have to form a healthy attachment with our identity, because that's who we are in this physical incarnation right now. And until we recognize that we're in a human flesh suit right now on this 3D playing this game, we can't transcend into something else. So this martyrdom on a collective level shows us where we can or where we are or are not identifying with self and what that looks like, whether it looks like a self-acceptance or whether it looks like a death of the self. And all of this are going to experience this in our own ways. There's so much that wants to come through because this is a realistic gene. The reality is that we are in a shift. We're in a shift on our humanity, shifting out of one paradigm and in another paradigm. And in the paradigm of patriarchy that we've been in for the last 4,000 years, we were outsourcing our power. And in that outsource of power, we created a society that was giving us our identity, and it was labeling us in so many ways that we formed attachments around. That breaking out of that paradigm keeps asking us to have love, grace, and compassion as we're still creating the version of us that is the most authentic. And so this is the path where we stop seeking. This is the path where we can honor that I accept myself exactly as I am in my perfect imperfection. And from this place, this enlightened part of us turns on when we can actually resonate into the truth of I do accept. I accept that everything is perfect as it is, as well as I accept my desire for it to be different than it is. And when I can feel with resonance in my body the allowance for both of those poles to be here, that's when I allow my body to shift and transmutate and let go of a sense of self or attachment to an identity, archetype, or ego that says it should be doing this with my time. It should be going here with my space. It should be having this many friends or this many labels or this much money in my bank account, because all of a sudden you come into this state of being, and in your most vulnerable, authentic state, you become the embodiment of I both be while I become. And that's it. When you become acceptance of who you be, there's no more seeking. When there's no more seeking, there's a different impulse in how you navigate life. And so, as I experience this as a medicine woman. I am the embodiment of medicine. I'm 40 years old and I've reached a place of now accessing the DNA of wisdom in my body. And I had to be very patient for that to naturally emerge. And that naturally emerged through my own personal experiences of navigating life as a human being and learning my radical truth through experiencing enough things that I can say, my body opens here, my body closes here. I go places where I feel the expansion because that expansive state is illuminating for me. It feels good. I like to be in places that feel good. And therefore, I have a boundary because the gift of this naturalness is self-love. And self-love has a boundary and says, the way that those people make me feel doesn't feel expansive in my body. It doesn't feel inclusive. It doesn't feel good. And I'm going to trust the trigger to teach me. I'm going to trust my body's response to people and experiences to teach me how to trust my intuition and allow that to guide me on the next steps. And so if these people are causing me contraction or causing me suffering, I'm going to trust my boundary that they're no longer welcome around me, because I don't want to feel contracted. And I don't want to minimize who I am. And I don't want to shrink. I had to shrink too much. I don't want to do that anymore. This gift of naturalness is I want to be around the people that can accept me for who I am. And I don't have to be somebody different for. And this is such a tightrope for many of us who came here to be the paradigm shifters in our family and break out of these ancestral ties. Because when we break out of the ancestral ties, essentially what we're doing is we're saying no more to our mom, to our dad, to our brothers, to our sisters, to the people that have inflicted pain upon us. At one point, we were in a dynamic of needing to feel safe. And through that safety, we created a level of adaptability where we could shapeshift and be anybody that anybody needed us to be. And at one point in our life, that was our greatest gift. And that's how we navigated a really traumatic life. And so a lot of people feeling a resonance with this gene or having this gene may feel that they've tapped into a mystical aspect of nature simply in returning themselves to nature, because in doing so, you recognize the goddess or God within you, and you stop being outsourced by others. You stop playing the game. You leave the matrix. And I've said it before, but the matrix is a simulation of our patterns through our time and space reality. And once we start recognizing the patterns, we can break out of the matrix, because we see a different omniscient aspect of the pattern around this person is that they tend to X, Y, and Z. And the way that makes me feel is X, Y, and Z. Based upon these patterns, I'm going to trust my body to guide me in this way. I was having a conversation with my partner just this morning, because this is the gene of friendship. This is really what the gift of friendship is. It's when we have built a community around us where we are free to be peaceful, happy, safe, and free in all of our full expression in our community, and everyone else is also safe to be that as well. There's been some different ruptures in our community over the past year where it hasn't felt completely safe to be around this community, because sometimes there have been people in the community that are extracting, that are really draining, that no matter how much space you hold for them, they just keep wanting more and more and more. And now when you have in our dynamic here, my partner facilitates a sweat lodge. And so once a month, he has people on the property. It's donation based. It's out of the goodness of his heart. It brings people together to pray in a good way, sing our songs, build the fire, have this shamanic rite of passage in community, connecting with others. And it's given him a lot of satiation. And also, there's been a huge burnout that has come from it as well, when he can feel like his time is not feeling precious by others, because they keep extracting. Because at some point, if you're holding so much space for others, you want them to hold some space for you too. And if you have people that have a never ending victim story, then they don't have the space to hold for other. And so again, this is the job of, we're either mothering ourselves or we're othering ourselves. We're holding and harmonizing space for each other's inner child, each other's traumas to be processed, connecting with others, or we're shutting those spaces down and we're contracting from those spaces. This is, my sisters this past month came up with a word, and I keep finding myself using it, and it's balance. And it's the delicate balance of honoring multiple truths. My multiple truth is that for me, I love to hold virtual space. I love sister calls. I love the experience of showing up in my naturalness. I don't have to prepare anything. I will read the gene key before the call, but as a refresher to keep it fresh on my memory about the things that I want to allow to come alive when I start basking in that frequency. But there's not a bunch of prep work. Where for my partner, he's going to start chopping the wood in the morning. He's going to prepare all the wood. He's going to prepare the fire. He's going to prepare the sweat lodge. We get it all domed. We've got the e-light that goes out. We're collecting any of the altar items. We're building the altar. We're building all the setup. We're preparing the food. We're preparing the cacao. We're preparing ourselves to hold space. We're preparing for the fact that even though this ceremony says it's for 2 hours, people are going to stay for 6 because people just want to stay here. We have to energetically prepare that if 15 people say they're coming, there might be 30. If they say they're coming for 3 hours, it might be 6. And so being fluid, being natural to say, how much space do I have? For me, that's too much space to have my entire day consumed with this service when everybody's extracting from me and there's everybody looking for me to hold space for them. In a virtual capacity, this is a different flow. I'm still in my energy. I've still got my incense coming to me right now. And I get to wipe this off at the end of the ceremony. And there's a difference in the physical space and all the prep work that goes into building the fire in the sweat lodge versus showing up to just harmonizing space in a drop-in call or educational call. Very different ways of using our energy. No one better or worse than the others. We have capacity for different things. He can be more satiated with the physical space. He's a very more earthly person. So physical, tangible things, building the fire, hugging the people, the connection of breath and voice and frequency is going to be a very felt experience for him. It's who he is. It's the naturalness of his being. To be very shamanic, to be an amazing space holder, for people to want to be around him and to open their hearts and to share with him and vulnerably release their whole story with him. That's who he is as someone that this is his gene key. I keep bringing up my partner because this is his life's work, this gene key. His birthday's on Friday. In a repressive nature, this could be the martyr. This is the person that doesn't value their own time. And so everything they do is service. And this is something that I was role modeled from by my father, is constantly extracting yourself for the external validation of the career, of the paycheck, of the wife, saying that, you know, there's a value in being the provider and all of that. So this divine expression of being, you know, has made us circle this morning just to be honest in our vulnerability that, you know, he had a friend that he met through this community now just build a sweat lodge and hold a space and have a ceremony. And all of our community went to another sweat lodge, another medicine experience, and we weren't even invited. And like, ouch, that can hurt when you're like, wow, I thought we were all in this together. And this is the paradox of, you know, I have the hardest time articulating this, which is why I'm going to go back to saying this is my truth. This is not universal truth. In my personal experience, for me, the sweat lodges, these are donation afternoons that we gather the community to come together and sweat in prayer. For me, my community is not my friend group. This is my community. These are people that I serve and I serve with. These are not people that I share the details of my heart with and my vulnerable expressions. These are people that I harmonize space with. These are people that I listen to. These are people that I do energy work with. These are people that I serve. And there becomes a disheartened place sometimes when you want those people that you serve to also be your friends, but there's a vibrational misalignment and they're not in the same resonance that out of service that my partner and I feel that calling for just playing with and just being with. Because in our experience, and this just, it's so paradoxical how it can feel so shadowy, and it can also feel like within our gifts of boundaries is just to honor authentically the pace that we're at when we feel out of alignment with people, and where we are more selective with our boundaries and our time and our energy and our resources and our space. Well, we're saying it doesn't feel in alignment to go to those places with you, or to show up in that, at that party, or at that bar, or at that uh, event that you're hosting. And for me, it's because I'm still navigating the trigger with my sobriety. And so there are places that are still not feeling fully safe for me, and a lot of my community that still can juggle drinking on occasion, or overindulging in hot bay, or not ceremoniously taking medicine, but being with, MDMA or ketamine, and things that are just not in alignment for me. And so I have been more selective in my sobriety with the company that I keep, and recognizing that my partner and I are bodhisattvas, and we are here to help people awaken to the light of their true nature and return to the wholeness that all beings deserve: to be happy, safe, peaceful, and free. And that includes us. And so if my freedom feels contracted around people that are overindulging in ways that are feeling like self-sabotaging behaviors, it's in my best interest to have a space for grace. And that space for grace is my boundary to say, go be you, do you. I support you in being you. And I also support myself, and I can't be around that. And that's been difficult. And just in the radical authenticity of this moment, I'm experiencing that in a lot of ways with, people in my life that, for example, a best friend of mine, we've been best friends since I was like 11, 12 years old. And it was just her birthday the other day. And I was feeling this huge resistance on calling her. And I love her. I love her so much. And also, our trajectories on our lives have taken such a 180 that there's not a lot of resonance right now. And while there are deep personal experiences that I've just had, I'm not feeling the resonance in this moment at this time to share the contents of my heart with her, because right now I haven't cultivated safety in the new dynamics of who I am in this moment, that she can hold this kind of space for me that I would prefer for her to hold. And so I'm holding space for me to say the most radical act of self-love is not sharing something personal with someone that I don't think can hold me in it, someone that could potentially rupture me or judge me or have a low vibrational energy come at me that is not in alignment, is not supportive. And so it's my boundary that comes up. So I feel like I'm so all over the place in this gene, and I'm going to blame Mercury in retrograde. Mercury is retrograding in Capricorn right now. We're about to go into Capricorn. We will be in Capricorn for this gene key. Capricorn is, oh, this is so perfect. When I was speaking with my partner this morning, we just watched Mary Poppins, his idea, the other day. And there is the most perfect Capricorn quote in it that he reminded me of this morning, that says, in every job that must be done, there is an element of fun. Find the fun and snap. The job's a game. And that is the spirit of my partner in Capricorn, that everything for him is a job. It is a way to resource. And there is something so practical and something so beautiful about this. While this gene, it's not just Capricorn, it is Sagittarius and Capricorn. Sagittarius being a mutable fire over a cardinal earth. So that means that this gift of naturalness is always changing, it's always shifting. And it's shifting, it's not being, how do I want to say this? At one point I wanted to, and I'm not done with this It's not to say that I'm not going to ever do this, but there was a longing a lot of this year to go out into the jungle and to study ayahuasca and to sit with the plant teacher and to be out there for an extended amount of time. I still have that longing, but practical nature is like, well, it's not happening yet. I don't have the resources to just go out there for a while. And so what I've come into, and through a solstice ceremony that I was a part of yesterday, what I was claiming my manifestation for 2024 is, my manifestation is, I am the medicine woman, because I am the medicine. I am no longer seeking to keep ingesting this plant, that this plant has all the answers. I have all the answers. And 2024 is about me more stepping into the role as the medicine. And that's the naturalness of my being at this juncture, is I am going to be the medicine in every single experience. And that medicine doesn't uninclude myself. And so if the medicine in this moment means space and boundaries, well, I've come out of one pool of water and there's nobody in my pool yet, but I don't want to jump back into this pool party because I actually have outgrown that pool. I'm not going to judge myself. I'm going to honor that I'm in this in-between state. If I can release my judgment around about what's being released right now, I can create space that the right people are going to come in that are aligned with who I'm still becoming. And those reflections are going to help me become even more of who I be. And it's this paradox, this dance of releasing one without the judgment, and just simply acknowledging that in this 3D Maya, we're constantly in a cycle of death and rebirth. And while one aspect of our psyche is dying, and sometimes it feels atrocious, there's another aspect of our being that's being reborn. And the aspect of our being that's being reborn right now is the eternal child that has been birthed through the new hierarchy within us, with a sacred mother, divine feminine, and a sacred masculine, divine masculine. When we have the union within us, when we've balanced our poles, that says, cease fire now, end all wars, while also saying, I release everyone to be in their own choice around how they have decided to break down the patriarchy in their own psyche. I release my judgment around what's happening on our planet, so that I can also, or while I also hold in this space, that what is coming into our planet right now is this, what I resonate as is heaven on earth, or the kingdom of earth, or the golden ages. So here we were, 2023, the chariot. If you look in numerology using the tarot, 2023 is number 7 in numerology. Number 7 in the tarot is the chariot. If you look at the chariot card, you're going to see darkness and light. While there is a chariot, well, the person has their hands out, but they're not actually driving the chariot. They're actually surrendered, they've released, and they've let go, and they're being moved through space. 2023 was the year of being moved through space. This was building our Merkaba while we were on it, building our spaceship while we're on the ride. Can't be more difficult than that, the being and the simultaneous becoming. And 2024, this is the year of infinity. This is the year of abundance. This is the year of infinite timelines and truths, harmoniously holding space that with death comes rebirth, with birth comes death. This is the life cycle. Nothing really dies. Everything is matter, which cannot be created nor destroyed, which includes us. So right now, if you've been hearing any of the anything about the WHO's, the World Health Organization's last meetup, there is conversations around, pandemic part 2. Well, what we learned about pandemic part 1 was this was a pandemic of fear. And this was a pandemic of isolating. And through isolating, people either put down the bottle and asked the question, who am I? And started diving into a spiritual practice, or people did not ask that question, did not look within, and distracted, disassociated, became zombies, became highly impacted, influenced, and potentially less awakened through the experience of isolation. I think it's so important to recognize that when our cells in our body isolate, that becomes cancer as we know it in our body. And so what our beings do when there is a dis-ease in our body that goes into isolation, that's a retriggering of our exile wound. That's a retriggering of that mythological story that says that we are separate. And when we feel into that separation wound and we walk into that story, we cause ourselves a lot of suffering. So the awakening journey is really returning back into the oneness, returning back to our wholeness, and remembering that we're all part of the same one. And so we come out of that that way of thinking. And I'm losing my train of thought again. I am not happy with Mercury. No, I'm not happy with myself because I there's so many things I want to say, and I just keep getting caught. I think of this archetype. This archetype is considered the natural. I think of it as the hippie. Of course, this is me thinking my partner again, but like, how natural is the hippie? They come outside, and I am this as well. This is one of my archetypes, is, barefoot in nature, braless and hugging the trees and charging with the sun and remembering that I am nature, naturalness. I am natural. I am nature. I am not separate from nature. I don't buy into any of that programming around being separate from nature. And so this is a radical authenticity, and this is what we get with Sagittarius. So again, with the astrology right now, we have double Sagittarius, we have double fire. Today, specifically, the sun sign is Sagittarius and the moon sign is Aries. And so this might make us feel like really revved up and charged to share your voice, or to share your shame and blame and projection. And both of these are happening right now. We're seeing this on a collective level, huge. And I know I had my own judgments with it, and I can still hold both truths, where in, some sisterhoods, I feel like there's so much love and light and a focus on the branding of the business, where I've had to step back and look and see, is this thy will or is this my will? And what am I supporting? Right now, during this holiday season, we've been asked more than ever, what am I supporting with every dollar that I spend? What am I supporting with every ounce of energy that I have? Am I supporting something that's misaligned with me? Am I supporting patriarchy? Am I supporting consumerism? And can I support these things? And can I be graceful as I watch other people support these things? Can I continue to stay in the paradox without judgment? So, so many things, so many things. There's such an important thing about naming all the aspects of our psyche that are undesirable, that are wanting to be changed. And when we see this on a collective level, we want to share the message, because I don't know about Joe, but I know that when I was a kid and I was reading about World War II, my question kept being over and over and over again to myself, what was the whole wide world doing while this was happening? Well, this many people were dying. How did nobody else step in? I feel like that again on a collective level, where there's a part of my psyche that says, how are we here again? Are there so many people that are in concentration camps right now? How are there people bombing each other? How are there wars happening? And how are there other sides of the world that are Christmas shopping, like everything is hunky dory and like there's no genocide and ethnic cleansing happening? And how can these people that are Christmas shopping, that are selling their retreats and their packages, not be talking about this over here, while simultaneously honoring the fact that when we are so consumed by shadow and distractions in every single way that it shows up, then we are manifesting, we're bringing more awareness into the things that we don't want as well. How can we hold both places? For me, this is really bringing me into a huge place of looking into my own, who am I again in this moment, because it always keeps changing. And so at one point on my journey, I would have said that who am I is I am someone that um, wants to be a teacher, wants to help people awaken to the light of their true nature, want to help people return to their wholeness. And so, interesting thing this week that happened was, um, I was so we have an apartment space that we were renting out, or we were having a friend stay there. And since I've lived here, there's always been people that have been in that space. Well, that space just opened up. And so my partner gifted me that space as an office space. And so I have this new template, this new blank canvas where I'm so excited that I can go in and I can create. And then I start thinking about Rise Wellness, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is, what's the next thing for Rise Wellness? And I bump into, as I'm moving some things over there, I bump into a notebook, and the notebook is from 2018. And this notebook says in it that that I had just been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder with grandiose thinking, which was perfectly in alignment with the gene key that we just came out of as well, which was the divine expression of light, the shadow of obscurity. And so there have been a lot of times during my life where I've been really outcasted, especially by Western doctors, as having a mental illness. And what I've come into acceptance now is that I was not equipped to handle the amount of trauma and suffering that I experienced. And therefore, I've simultaneously experienced enlightenment while also embodying a lot of trauma and suffering and grace. And I believe that grace is suffering, and grace is something that we acquire through time when we give ourselves more space to recognize that everyone has their own mythological story. Everyone has a mythos that they're walking through with a victim pattern on how they say that life happened to them. And, it's through my gift of awakening that I've been able to recognize that this wasn't just isolated in my experience. I've had several females but also male, but several females, several people in my lineage that were also highly sensitive people. And what I've learned about them through connecting with them is that some of them have turned to plant medicine and sit with holding regular spaces now with plant medicine and have gone a shamanic realm because they've realized that this is not the world that makes me feel safe and happy and peaceful and free. So I'm reclaiming my role as the bodhisattva to be the medicine and serve the medicine until all beings awaken to the light of their true nature. And so it's through my acceptance of my disability, my handicap, that it was my gift that I have found through my shadow that my way of being is very shamanic. I have a way of communicating within other realms that's not accessible to everyone, but that comes easy to me. That's part of my naturalness, is to understand the language of energy and to communicate to others the language of energy in a way that I try to make practical and relatable so that people can have aha moments. And each aha moment is an illuminating into one of our DNA aspects where we can hold a little bit more space, a little bit more grace for the human condition. And so this gift of naturalness this week, I am so excited to just be in this union with my beloved and celebrate his birthday this week and do what's natural for us and keep it easy. And this is the gift of this gene, is it's not about overcomplicating things. It's really about simplifying things. And, one of the gifts that I want to give to my partner this year is my commitment, my devotion, and through energetic ceremonies, to do monthly ceremonies and to work with Reiki healing and the full moon and the solstice energies through massage and Reiki work, but doing this together, to grow together, to be together in our sacred play and intimately honor the fact that we're still being and becoming both simultaneously. And it can feel lonely sometimes, but what better thing then we still have each other, and through having each other, that can be enough while we're still learning who we're gonna create with and collaborate with. And the Sacred Wild has been a beautiful place to start building that, as well as for me, I'm also in the Fluorescence Sisterhood. Part of my being and becoming next year is I'm holding space for not only weekly practical magic sister calls, but I'll also be holding space for full moon ceremonies virtual and once a month a beginner astrology course. And these are extensions of my being. These are free services, and they're ways that I want to donate my time. For me, it's not about trying to become the medicine woman that lives in Peru. I just want to share the medicine of what I know, and that's astrology, and that's practically using our birth charts and our gene keys to navigate this world as the medicine. And so that's been my radical reclamation for next year, is really just being a medicine woman. And I say woman with a B in there, woman, as a medicine carrier through my womb. And that's the invitation that I really invite for this week. I'm going to finish with the wisdom story and the questions. I feel like I've said so many words, but I hope that there's any kind of anything that comes from there. I feel so all over the place today. I think this is the gift of Wu Wei, or I know this is the gift of Wu Wei, or another quote that I love so much is far dolce niente, which is the sweet art of doing nothing. And that is divine laziness. That is the highest expression of this gene. It's remembering that we're just here to be the embodiment of life moving through us. We can stop seeking, we can stop searching, we can stop needing to get the trophy, the merit, the validation, and we honor who we are in the moment. And so I'm going to finish with this wisdom story and questions for contemplation may you take into the rest of your journey. It says, once you understand that you are neither your name or your actions, feelings, thoughts, or beliefs, you realize that human nature is something far greater and wider than you ever suspected. My wisdom story. My parents and my culture always prioritized the collective over the individual. As a young girl, I mastered the arts of self-denial and invisibility. I lived through and for the people around me. Over time, I started to feel like I was drowning, like I couldn't breathe, until an anger rumbled so loudly within me I could no longer deny it. Suddenly, my survival no longer depended on my disappearing. It depended on my ability to reject my family and conditioning at all costs. I could no longer risk losing myself, so I became obsessed with myself. I wanted to know myself, be myself, dress like myself, act like myself, even pray and commune with spirit like myself. I looked to the West to show me how to be a true individual. I became so good at being me I became so good at being me that no one could penetrate my fortress of selfhood or my heart. I couldn't afford to be sensitive or to care about how my way of being impacted others. I believed most people wanted to change or trap me. The rest of them, in my opinion, needed changing themselves. And it wasn't until all my relationships fell apart that I realized just how narcissistic I'd become. It took courage to see and own just how angry, paranoid, and impenetrable I was, and how, in my fear of losing myself, I'd been pushing people away. Today, I feel great compassion for myself and all beings who suffer as we struggle to find our way in life, to live out our true nature. It took me years to feel safe enough to let go of all of the identity trappings I gathered along the way and to fully grasp that my true nature is beyond all definition. Now I know that we can only experience and operate as a unity if we allow ourselves to be our unique, natural selves. My gift to you. I see you striving to discover who you are, and I know how difficult it can be to answer this deeply human question. While you're searching for yourself, do not forget to enjoy the journey. There will be a time when you can just let it all go. In the end, you're not what you do or what you know. You are not your thoughts, feelings, or beliefs, nor are you your looks or job description. Over time, as this truth sinks in, and as you stop arguing with your life, you'll find yourself becoming more grounded, centered, and full of joy. More relaxed, free, and at ease. Whatever's in your heart, whatever you're meant to do or express will simply arise out of you with naturalness. I'm here to remind you that you are far more splendid than your mind could ever grasp, and your authentic nature is destined to bloom and contribute to the magnificent garden of which you're all a part. Graciously take a bow, get out of your own way, and let it happen. Questions for contemplation. Where are you compromising or losing yourself in others? Where are you self-obsessed or clinging too tightly to an identity, a way of thinking, being, or doing? Where might you still be playing the martyr? Where do you need to stop compromising? Think of a time you experienced true naturalness. When did you feel fully relaxed in your own skin? What about the situation brought out the naturalness in you? In what ways can you expand your sense of self or of being? Write your reflections in your journal. So as we see the full spectrum right now, we see a lot of darkness, and then we see a lot of light. that looks like it's not looking at the darkness at all. And when we see the darkness, sometimes it doesn't look like it's looking at the light at all. And so, how can we be discerning, discriminatory, and to say what feels natural, what feels like it's bringing me into my own embodiment of truth? And how can I move at my own authentic pace, each divinely guided step at a time, allowing myself the grace to pivot back and forth? Sometimes I can be really into the darkness and the next day really into the light. And I can move in whatever way feels most aligned for me, because that's the naturalness of following my own internal compass without having to be validated by what's going on around me. As within, so without. Sending you so much love and blessings. Happy solstice time. This is a beautiful time for reflection. What do you want to call in for next year? This action-oriented spirit of the double fire today is about celebrating everything that you've done this past year up until now, and in that place of that excitement of celebrating, of being grateful for, what's the next divinely guided step of service that you can take? We are moving beyond the self. If we've already embraced the narcissistic aspects of us, now we can transcend it. Now we can see that moving beyond self is social justice in whatever way feels alive for us. My social justice next year is free astrology courses, because my social justice is illuminating people's psyche so that they can find and detect the war within their own mind and break it down. And from that place is my service on how we end all wars. Someone else might have a different way, picketing in the street and protesting, and they're still just as divine in act. Everyone will find their own way to bring their service to the world in a way that's uniquely true for them. And your big question is to say, my will or thy will? And which one do I have the capacity to support today, and why? And how can I have compassion and grace for my choice and the choices of all others? Sending you love and blessings. Namaste.